Well, my word, Internet, I think I did it. I think I finally figured out how to use this camera to stream. I'm very happy. Hello, friends. So, in celebration of actually getting this camera to stream, I thought it would be nice to engage in a little bit of completely unscripted ranting, as is my wont. So, today I want to talk about abstraction, metaphysics, and the limits of introspection. And in the service of sort of getting back in the swing of just shooting from the hip, doing things off the cuff, more content, less being mired in editing, I fully failed to prepare myself for this. So let's see what comes out of the old noggin, right? So, as you go about the business of being a happy human being, one of the most important facets of that, oh shit, my mic is in the wrong position. Hopefully that was somewhat audible before. We're just going to keep rolling. Slipshod. That's the name of the game today. So in the service of being a happy human being, you're going to need to gather a lot of information about what's going on in here. And that can be a process that leads you down some really unfruitful paths, because many of the things that you experience as you begin to peer into the depths of your own mind are incredibly powerful from the point of view of shaping how you perceive the world. You see some things and you just can't unsee them, and the whole world looks different. And usually that's an overwhelming positive. But these experiences can be so powerful that people can come to believe that they're revelatory, that they have learned something about the universe at large from perceiving this corner of their mind. And that's really dangerous, because that leads into getting into things like metaphysics, where you can spend a tremendous amount of time discussing, speculating, arguing about how the universe is, and ultimately distract from the pursuit of how you are and how you can be happy. So it can feel very, very much like I've made this big discovery and it's changed everything, so this must be informing me about the universe. No, it's informing you about how your experience is put together. And it's important to keep in mind that your experience is the end result of a software ecosystem in the most literal sense that has just sort of been cobbled and kludged together to run on top of a biological information processing system that is the result of an evolutionary process that was really optimizing for finding food, shelter, and mates, and dodging predators in the Serengeti in Africa like 3 million years ago. So all of that is to say, it's a mess. It's not a software or hardware stack that anybody would intentionally design if they wanted a stable, robust, reliable information processing system. There are going to be all sorts of pitfalls and strange corners to discover in there. And the discovery of those things can be incredibly empowering, but we're like many layers of abstraction up from the raw sensory data coming in about the universe, so we can't expect the revelations that we make when we dig around in there to actually be deep truths about the universe. So the main criticism of mystics in general, people who sit in caves and go out into the desert or in the forests and stare at walls and things like that, is that they're guilty of navel gazing. And that is, in many times and places, a legit criticism, that they're just sort of looking inward at themselves and not engaging fruitfully with the world at large. And that is not what we're up to, so we need to avoid those sorts of traps. So, in keeping with a somewhat recent theme of mine of trying to provide concrete examples where possible, one experience that I had that was really transformative for me was the realization that when I get good information, like if I've got a problem going on in my life and I arrive at the solution to it, the way that solution arrives experientially is very strange, in that I'm chilling, living life, and then poof, out of the ether comes this entire complete package of information. And if I'm paying attention, I can sit and watch this thing sort of unspool and begin making modifications to the state of my brain, initiating behaviors, changing my memories, changing my patterns of cognition on the fly to move my being into a state that is going to allow me to cope with whatever situation is unfolding that has been stressing me and causing me to search for some sort of solution, for an answer, for information, right? And it feels like the only thing that's fruitful that I can do is sit quietly and let it unfold. It's a very passive experience. So the best, most fruitful, productive moments of my life, the moments that actually reorient my being and get me pointed down the path that's going to take care of me, happen in a state where I have nothing to do but sit there and watch it unfold. And that's really, for me at least, that was really strange, that I didn't have anything to do. And then in fact it felt like this entire process was being directed from outside of myself. And I remember discussing this, as of course, when I was up at the monastery and we were talking to a meditation group, and I remember saying it feels like I'm just a big antenna that suddenly has been tuned to the correct broadcast, and then here comes this stream of information, and there's no generation of it going on here. It's just getting attuned correctly so that the information can just pop in. Now, this is an opportunity where one could go down the metaphysical path. Oh, what if consciousness is something that exists independent of any given organism and is in fact an intrinsic property of the universe, and the human brain is really just functioning like an antenna and starting to perceive, right, the cognition that's already extant everywhere in all times and places in the universe, right? That's a sort of thing that one could could start to think about this experience, right? And, you know, full disclosure, I wandered around in that little mire for some time. To my credit, not a tremendously long time, but for some time. What I eventually realized is I have no idea. That's just way outside the bounds of stuff that I could know, and I wasn't actually making my life better by wondering about it. But what I could do is go, can I collect some more data about this phenomenon? Can I find out anything about what this means for how I understand my experience of the world to be put together? Does this provide me with any sort of threads to pull on to begin to understand better what my experience is, how it gets put together, and how I can intervene in it? And when I started going in that direction with this information, what I discovered was, so far as I can tell, that's how it's supposed to work. And in fact, that's how it always works. That most of the heavy lifting, most of the major information processing that goes on in my brain, and I suspect all human brains, happens in hardware that is at a low level that we don't have as this sort of conscious epiphenomenon riding on top of this stack access to. So we, the glorious locus of observation that we are, sort of perceive our human organism interacting with the world, and we come up upon some sort of problem or challenge, and we take in all the givens about that and load up the problem, and then the brain sends it to the information processing systems, and those just kind of cruise in the background. And eventually, when they're done, poof, here comes this information, right? It just appears as if out of nowhere, because there's nothing in the conscious part of the human organism, or the part of the human organism that's generating consciousness, that has the tools to do the sort of information processing that was needed in this case. So it got loaded off to hardware somewhere, just like facial recognition, or, you know, picking words out of an audio stream, or all sorts of other problems happen completely unconsciously and below the level at which we perceive things, right? Problem solving happens there too. All sorts of problem solving. And so, poof, here comes the full complete package. Here are the results of all of that computation, and they just already contain the hooks that they need to run the sort of programs, if you will, in the brain to generate the behaviors needed to act on this information. So the conscious part of the brain doesn't have anything to do here because this isn't its specialty. This isn't its domain of operation. It's just got to get out of the way and let these sort of hardware processes finish their job of getting the information in and setting up the state for the human organism to go forward and constructively interact with the world. That's how I think it works, which is a whole lot of information about how my experience gets put together that I never would have had access to if I didn't go, wait a minute, there's no way that I'm getting good information about the universe just by staring at the contents of my own brain, right? There's a reason that, it's taken us hundreds of years to build up a semi-reliable scientific methodology, and that involves an entire community working in any given discipline together to incrementally make progress about the world. Like, probably I'm not going to figure it all out by staring at a wall. But what I can do is figure out a tremendous amount about how my little corner of the universe gets perceived by the spongy meat computer that actually is building up my experience of the world. And by keeping my cognitive resources directed towards figuring out that sort of stuff and not noodling some sort of metaphysical interpretation of the experiences that I discover in doing my little sitting around staring at walls sorts of activities, I have a much better chance of fruitfully engaging with those experiences, extracting the maximum possible value from those experiences, and moving further down the path of being a happy human being.